Maria, upon entering our home, immediately claimed the guest room as her own space. Because it's closest to both the bathroom and the bath, and I don't have to go through the living room, so I don't have to see anyone's face. Although I thought she was referring to me when she said, "I don't have to see anyone's face," I refrained from harsh words because she is pregnant and just swallowed my feelings. Then, my husband said, "Look, I want you to leave this house. You bully our son's wife, don't work, and just leech off our home, you're the worst." I don't remember bullying Maria or leeching without working. Enough is enough, I've lost all patience. This house is in my name and it's my house. My eldest son and his wife will live with us. So you can leave. We'll pay the $700 mortgage. Sure, I replied. Although the mortgage is actually $2,700. So, I obediently agreed to leave the house. Take the dog with you. Of course. I couldn't possibly leave Buddy in such a precarious home. I feel bad for David, but I thought it was like the devil himself had arrived when Maria came into our home. Cursing and arriving at our home, I've been observing her, wondering what her purpose was. Just as I suspected, Maria turned out to be a terrible person. John was naive enough to be completely taken in by Maria, which surprised me. I understand, I'm not young anymore, and I must have changed. Yet, I had hoped that's how we would age together. Just like that house. Being fickle is a disadvantage. You can't finish anything and are irresponsible, perhaps eternal damnation suits you. Especially since your beloved young demon is with you. Both of you should just fall into damnation. My name is Dorothy, a 58-year-old working housewife. I met John, my husband who is 6 years my junior, about 30 years ago through a mutual acquaintance. At that time, I was 28, and John was 22. John, in his first year as a working adult after graduating from college, was an utterly dazzling presence for me. John, who liked older women, was not only good at being spoiled but also surprisingly gentlemanly and mature in his behavior. And I began to have feelings for him. John felt the same, and after 6 months of dating, we got married. Then, thinking about our future family and retirement, we decided to build a house. John had always said since the beginning of our marriage, it's better to build a house while we're young. Indeed, considering the mortgage, it's better when you're younger. But it was difficult to get a housing loan under John's name as a first-year employee. I could have built it under my name, but John's pride as a man insisted it be in his name. Eventually, we decided to build the house after John had worked steadily for a year and had a track record to get a loan. I was working too, so I diligently saved for our house. It wasn't hard work for me, because it was for our own house. Also, at John's strong request, we managed our finances separately after marriage. We created a joint account in John's name for living expenses, where we both deposited a fixed amount. It was truly shared property of the married couple. From there, we would cover food expenses and utility bills. Even after building the house, we agreed to split the monthly mortgage repayment. Even deciding on such rules as a couple felt fun as newlyweds. And a year after our marriage, we finally got our long-awaited dream home. The brand new house, with its carefully planned layout, fulfilled our hearts. A year after building the house, we were blessed with our eldest son David, and 3 years later, our second son James. And I felt the utmost happiness. Now, 30 years after our marriage, David has married and left home. With James also starting to live alone, only the two of us were left in the spacious house. Still, I intended to enjoy our slow time together in this house. After the kids left home, John started talking about getting a dog. Probably to distract from loneliness, but I guess there were other reasons too. Since we started living just the two of us, John became increasingly harsh towards me. "I'm sick of waking up to your face every morning." He could say such things without batting an eye. Even when I mentioned that aging is a part of life for both of us, he wouldn't accept it, saying, "I used to think older ladies looked pretty. But I guess it's annoying that you're aging faster than me." Saying so, he would quickly retreat to his room. In other words, he didn't want to face me, which led him to suggest getting a dog. I love animals, so I wasn't opposed to getting a pet. While John goes to work at the office, I've always worked from home, so I can take care of the dog during the day. My concern is whether John can truly take responsibility for its care until the end. When we built this house, John said, we'll keep it as shiny as new forever, and at first, he did put effort into daily cleaning and maintenance. But within a month, he grew tired of it and said, houses naturally deteriorate over time. It's best to accept them as they are. The expensive pressure washer and various other tools bought for house maintenance were soon left unused. Similarly, when our first son, David, was born, John was enthusiastic about child rearing, claiming, I'll be in charge of bathing him. Don't bathe him until I get home. But this lasted only for the first week. Despite waiting for John to bathe David, as he claimed it was his responsibility, he would just say, I'm tired today, and go to sleep. From then on, John never bathed David again. With our second son, James, I took care of everything from the start. John, who did nothing himself, would still criticize, saying things like, aren't you wiping him properly? Doesn't he need more moisturizer? And when I'd ask him to watch the kids on weekends, he'd say, the kids would rather be taken care of by their mother, and take a nap. So far, I've been handling house cleaning and child rearing alone, as if they were solely a woman's job. However, John stopped contributing to our joint account over a decade ago. He didn't contribute to the monthly living expenses or the house mortgage. The first time he didn't make a deposit, he said, I'm broke because of consecutive weddings this month. Just for this month, please. I let it slide, thinking it was just for 1 month. But there were no deposits the following month, and the month after that. Unable to delay the mortgage payments, I continued to pay them with my money. John couldn't sustain cleaning, childcare, or even financial responsibilities. That's why I was worried about him being able to properly care for a dog. I could only envision a future where I ended up taking care of everything. Still, if getting a dog could keep our marriage harmonious, I agreed to welcome one. We got a 6-month-old female Shih Tzu. John had fallen in love with her at first sight at the pet store. I was hesitant about adopting a puppy, considering our ages and the dog's lifespan. There's a chance that we might pass away before the dog does. If that happens, she would be left all alone. However, my worries were alleviated knowing that if anything happened to us, our sons would take care of her, allowing me to welcome her with peace of mind. The puppy, round and playful, was named Coco. Initially, there were smiles in our 2-person household with Coco. Watching her play tirelessly, so small and adorable, was endlessly charming. John seemed happy feeding her and brushing her. I thought maybe this time, he could take care of her properly. One day, while working in my room, I heard Coco crying from behind the door. It was 7 p.m., but John, who usually would be home by then, hadn't returned. So, I fed Coco in his place. But from that day onwards, such incidents became more frequent. I casually mentioned to John, you've been coming home late recently. Coco seemed lonely. He replied, I've been training a new employee at work. So, for a while, can you take care of Coco? I expected this, but it happened sooner than I thought. I believed he would at least care for her for a year, maybe until she grew into an adult. But I doubted whether a senior employee like John would directly train newcomers. This suspicion was confirmed when I saw a message on his phone saying, thanks for the meal the other day. Please invite me to dinner again. Accompanied by cute emojis, while he was in the bathroom. His training was something outside of work. Judging from this text, she must be a very young woman. I sighed and hugged my pet, Coco, tightly. Ever since John stopped caring for Coco, the pet has become completely attached to me. John doesn't seem to find this amusing. On holidays, when he occasionally tries to play ball with Coco, she doesn't respond to his invitations. Instead, Coco climbs onto my lap, which makes John angrily declare, who do you think raised you? For the past few months, I've been the one taking care of him. So, it makes sense that he's attached to me, but I don't say this to John. It's the same with the kids. If anything, they seem to favor me over John. Especially David, who's a mama's boy. As a child, he always followed me around. Whenever I was out of sight, he would cry out loudly, calling for me, possibly out of anxiety. Though his gentle and overly kind nature made me worry about his future, David has grown up and even gotten married. While pondering these things, my phone rang. It was a call from Maria, David's wife. Hello, Dorothy? Actually, I'm pregnant. Could I possibly stay with you for a while? I was surprised by the sudden news, but the thought of having a grandchild was delightful. Moreover, David often isn't home due to his long-haul truck driving job. I suggested that we should talk it over when David returned home. Then, I thought I heard a faint tongue-clicking sound, but Maria cheerfully agreed, saying, "Okay, I'll visit soon." So I brushed it off as a misunderstanding. On the weekend, David and Maria visited our house together. I was surprised to see that Maria, despite being pregnant, was still slim and slender. It's still early in the pregnancy, so my belly is small. "Don't stare, it's creepy," she said. David admonished her, saying, "That's not a nice way to talk," but Maria remained aloof. I had met Maria when she and David were getting married, but she didn't seem like this back then. I assumed her moodiness was due to the pregnancy and tried not to say anything that would upset her. Eventually, John joined us in the living room. His mood visibly lifted upon seeing the young and stylish Maria, saying unnecessary things like, "Maria is always cute and stylish, a real gem compared to my old-fashioned wife." In response, Maria, while laughing, said, "Oh, stop it, John. I bet Dorothy was better looking when she was young, right?" David looked anxious and sweaty sitting next to Maria. All I could do was sigh. David, being away from home, probably felt he couldn't be firm with Maria. Moreover, his current job was obtained through one of Maria's contacts. She had wished for a well-paying job, prompting David to switch careers upon their marriage. "Sorry, Mom. Since I can't be at home much, could you look after Maria for a while?" Honestly, I didn't have a good impression of Maria, but I couldn't refuse my beloved son's request. As for John, he seemed eager for Maria to stay, saying, "You can start staying over tonight." In the end, we decided to welcome Maria into our home starting the following week. David left for his long-distance job with a look of regret, boarding his truck. Upon entering our house, Maria promptly occupied the guest room, deciding it was her space. I chose this because it's close to the bathroom and bath, and I don't have to see anyone if I go through the living room. I swallowed my words, understanding her comment about not having to see anyone was directed at me, and considering she was pregnant. I refrained from harsh words. However, despite being pregnant, Maria often went out late at night. She would return home around the last train. Despite David entrusting me with her care, whenever I expressed my concern to Maria, she would snap, "Would you mind? Pregnant women get stressed out, you know, and dismiss me." However, even though she stays home all day, she doesn't lift a finger to do any household chores. She expects me to do everything, from laundry to meal preparation, and even to clean the guest room she's taken over. John keeps pampering her, saying she's pregnant, so she needs to rest. One day, Maria said, "I'm going to the hospital. I'll be admitted for about 2 weeks, so I need a substantial amount of money." "Oh. And don't visit me at all. The nurses will take care of everything." So, I handed her tens of thousands of dollars. The need for hospitalization made me worry if there were complications with the baby. And naturally, this made me concerned for Maria's health as well. I debated contacting David, but Maria had strictly forbidden it, so I refrained. After a worrisome 2 weeks, Maria returned from the hospital. When she came home, her skin was noticeably darker than before she was hospitalized. "Did you get a tan, Maria?" I asked casually. She became upset and exclaimed, "That's terrible. You know, during pregnancy, skin can darken and other minor issues can occur. Don't you know that? It's something I'm self-conscious about. Are you trying to be cruel by mentioning it?" So, I decided not to say anything further. To top it off, she claimed, "I hate dogs," and kicked Coco, leading me and Coco to decide to stay as far away from Maria as possible. 3 months have passed since Maria came to our house. I prefer not to see her face, so I spend most of my time working in my room. I've moved Coco's toilet and food into my room, and we live our lives avoiding any contact with Maria. In the morning, before John and Maria wake up, I prepare meals. In the evening, when Maria goes out, I use the opportunity to clean the house and do the laundry. If she needs anything, she calls me, otherwise, I avoid meeting her. One day, I happened to go to the living room during the day and saw Maria happily doing her nails. Remembering how I couldn't stand the smell of nail polish when I was pregnant with David, I asked her a simple question. "Are you okay with morning sickness, Maria?" Again, my words seemed to offend her. She glared at me and yelled towards John in the bathroom. "Hey, John. Dorothy is forcing me to work because I don't have morning sickness." Hearing Maria's voice, John rushed out of the bathroom and scolded me. "What are you saying? You're terrible. How can a woman like you not understand the hardships of a pregnant woman?" Another time, I saw Maria smoking under the kitchen vent. I reflexively snatched the cigarette away. Maria looked at me, clicked her tongue, and dramatically fell to the ground. Ouch. "Stop it, Dorothy. Forgive me, please." Because the living room window was open, neighbors gathered, hearing Maria's voice, wondering what was happening. I apologized to them, saying, "It's nothing," and they left. Maria was smirking at me. David comes home every 2 weeks, and Maria's attitude changes unbelievably during his visits. She hides her devilish side and becomes docile only during the days David is home. As soon as he leaves for work again, she reverts to her true self. Seeing Maria's behavior makes me wonder what David saw in her that made him want to marry her. Similarly, I find myself questioning what I saw in John, who has now become a puppet to his daughter-in-law. Back then, he was intensely focused on his work, with the goal of building a house in his own name. Back then, John was earnest and shining. It's been 30 years since that dream was realized, and we had children. Now, I'm the one repaying the mortgage of this house. Moreover, John has stopped contributing to our joint account, so I cover all living expenses with my money. Does John even realize this? Or does he know and still has the audacity to act high and mighty? While petting Coco on my bed, I was pondering these thoughts when a message arrived on my phone. It was from John. "Come to the living room immediately," it said. I placed Coco in the cage in the corner of the room and reluctantly headed to the living room. I idly wondered if he might finally confront me with a divorce. Lost in thought, I headed to the living room. There, John and Maria were sitting on the sofa, drinking tea using my favorite cup and saucer. They had used the teapot, but incorrectly. Without a tea strainer, the pot was full of tea leaves. Their cups were also filled with leaves, ruining the elegance of the cups and saucers. Yet, they seemed to be enjoying the atmosphere, so I remained silent. Let me be frank. I wondered to myself if John truly understood what it meant to be direct. Perhaps because of my unfocused expression, John glared at me sharply. "You know, I want you to leave this house. You're always picking on your daughter-in-law, not doing any work and just leeching off us. You're the worst. Did you know? Maria is a model. She plans to continue working even after giving birth. How admirable is that? It's a stark contrast to you, who isn't independent at all. Enough is enough, I'm fed up. This house is in my name, it's my house. The eldest son and his wife will live here, so get out. We'll pay the $700 mortgage. I have no recollection of bullying my daughter-in-law or not working and leeching off them. Frankly, I couldn't care less about Maria being a model. If he seriously thinks I'm not independent, he's greatly mistaken. There were many questionable points in John's speech, but what puzzled me most was the mention of $700 for the mortgage. It seems John thinks the house mortgage is only $700. He must be mistaken since he hasn't been paying it for a while. But since he's telling me to leave, it doesn't really matter at this point. Although the mortgage is actually $2,700, I responded, okay, and decided to leave the house. Take the dog with you. Of course. I couldn't possibly leave Coco in such a dangerous house. John and Maria didn't seem interested in me anymore and were engrossed in their own conversation. Right, if John is going to take over the mortgage payments, I need to give him the passbook for our joint account. I went back to my room, grabbed the passbook, and handed it to John. This account is where the mortgage payments are withdrawn from. Good luck with that. John forcefully snatched the passbook I handed to him and started checking it. He and Maria were smirking together. They were probably just looking at the balance. Indeed, the account had a considerable amount saved up, diligently accumulated by me as family savings. Yet, the important part, the details, seemed to be completely overlooked by them. Well, it's fine. They can deal with what comes next. I went back to my room and packed my belongings. Gathering Coco's things too, I ended up with more luggage than expected, but that was not a problem. I had no intention of leaving anything important in this house. Before leaving, I made a phone call. It was to my younger son, James. I briefly explained the situation and decided to go to James's place. Then, I left the house I had lived in for 30 years. It was honestly sad and frustrating to leave the house this way. But at that moment, I didn't want to spend another second in that space. When I reached James's apartment, he came down to the entrance to meet me. Seeing him casually help with the luggage made me realize how much my son had grown. "Mom, you've had a tough time. Take it easy today." His kind words almost brought me to tears. I gratefully accepted James's hospitality and rested for the day. The next evening, I received a call from David. He had probably just finished work and returned home. "Mom? Are you at James's place?" I heard from him. "I'm sorry, it's because I brought Maria home, isn't it?" "I'm really sorry." I could tell from his voice over the phone that David was deeply apologizing. Given his kind nature, he probably couldn't stand up to Maria. I had guessed that Maria behaved well when David was home every 2 weeks, probably to ensure she got her allowance properly. "I'm fine. But have you seen Maria? How was she?" David seemed hesitant to speak. Then he said, "Mom, there's something I want to talk about. Can I come over now?" As if he had made up his mind. That night, David, James, and I had a long talk. A lot of things became clear. I have no doubts anymore, it's time to divorce John. I feel bad for David, but I can't stay married to a man who brought home a devil-like daughter-in-law. I had been observing Maria's behavior and intentions since she arrived at our home. As I suspected, Maria turned out to be incredibly spiteful. Months passed, yet her belly never grew larger. From the day she returned from the hospital, her skin was notably tanned. She seemed inseparable from alcohol and cigarettes, like they were her best friends. Using her youth and beauty, she easily charmed and manipulated John. John, for his part, was astonishingly simple-minded in how easily he was swayed by Maria. He had developed a fondness for younger women. I understand that I'm no longer young and have changed since those days. Wrinkles have increased, and my body has started to ache. Still, I believe that aging together, just the two of us, was part of life's journey. Much like the way our house has aged over the years. Having a fickle nature is a disadvantage, after all. You can never see things through to the end, John, and for someone as irresponsible as you, a never-ending hell seems fitting. Especially with your beloved young devil by your side. Both of you might as well descend to hell together. 2 months have passed since I left the house. Lately, I've been doing well at work. This month looks promising too. As I paused for a break, my phone rang. It was John's name on the screen. I was expecting a call around this time, but I wish it wasn't on such a pleasant day. Still, I had to answer because it was important. "Yes, what's hap?" Before I could finish asking, I was met with a shout from the other end. "Hey. For some reason, we're being pressed for the house's mortgage payment. It's strange because we're supposed to be paying it every month. Did you do something?" Just as I thought, it was about the mortgage payments. John, thinking the mortgage was only $700, couldn't possibly pay the actual amount of $2,700. He must have already used up all the savings I left. I haven't done anything. More importantly, have you been properly depositing your salary for living expenses and mortgage payments? If you had, there would be no reason for you to be pressed for payments. What I said was entirely reasonable. John, taken aback, didn't retort immediately. But after some thought, he lashed out again. I calculated and left enough money. I made sure to leave $2,100 for 3 months, so there's no way the payment should be delayed. He still hadn't realized it. I thought he would at least glance through the account statement. I sighed deeply, countless times. Continuing this conversation over the phone was pointless. "All right. I'll come over tonight. David and James will join me. Have Maria wait there too." When I said that, John reluctantly agreed. Before I knew it, David and James were near me. They seemed to have a rough idea of what was going on. Both of them nodded towards me. I nodded back emphatically and headed towards the house where John and Maria were. Upon arrival, Maria was the first to burst out. "David. Where have you been? And what's this about quitting your job? I got you that job through my contacts. Don't joke around. As soon as she opened the door, she started yelling furiously, causing not only David but also me and James to recoil. David calmed her down, and we all entered the house. I was shocked upon reaching the living room. It was dirtier than I could ever imagine, completely different from when I lived there. Clothes were strewn about, and leftovers were left untouched. Dust had accumulated on the shelves, and tiny fruit flies were buzzing around. When David seated Maria on the sofa, his usually timid demeanor was replaced by a firm, husbandly presence. "Maria, about what we discussed earlier. You said you got me the job through your acquaintance, but I never asked for that, right? I wanted to keep working at my previous company. But somehow, I was resigned without my knowledge and employed there without consent. I've been trying hard, thinking it was your wish, but I always had a feeling of suspicion." David explained that he had reluctantly agreed to change jobs because Maria wanted a better salary after their marriage. However, he had noticed that the salary was not as good as expected for the hard work involved. To his surprise, his salary was even reduced after working there for a while. When he inquired with the company, he received an unsatisfactory explanation about rising fuel costs, which only increased his suspicions. I had James investigate, and it turns out the deducted amount was going to you, Maria. Since it's a company of an acquaintance. Such things are possible, right? If that's the case, just tell me. I would welcome it if it's for our living expenses. But you were also asking me for living expenses, medical bills, and more. Where did that money go? I'm starting to lose trust in you. David expressed his quiet anger with a somewhat sad look on his face. I felt an urge to hug David right away. What's the big deal about money? You're such a boring and dull man, and you got to marry me. You should be contributing money. Yes. I had you transfer to that company so you wouldn't be at home with your dreary face. I thought I married a man who would do anything I say. But you're the worst. Maria retorted arrogantly, not showing any remorse for hurting David. James and I couldn't help but lean forward at her attitude, showing no signs of concern for John. I wanted to slap her hard on behalf of David. My fists were trembling slightly. Enough with the marital spat, settle that later. My issue is more important. Listen, Dorothy, as I said earlier. I had enough money for 3 months of repayment. John, who had been silent until now, began to speak. It seems to be a continuation of the earlier phone conversation. 3 months, huh? That means you should have left at least $8,100. My remark made John's eyes widen. What? The loan repayment is $700 a month, isn't it? Maria said so, right? About $700 a month for a mortgage. It turned out that information came from Maria. Maria, standing next to John, nodded vigorously in agreement. That's right. My friend bought a condo with monthly payments of $700 to $800. She said it's like paying rent. Unfortunately for Maria, this was a single-family home, and John had been quite particular about the interior and layout. Moreover, the location was near a station, making it a prime piece of real estate. John had taken out the maximum possible loan to build this house on a 35-year mortgage. Did you actually look at the bank statements? There's no way this house costs only $700 a month. At my words, John hastily pulled out his bank book. Maria peered over. What? The repayment is $2,700 a month. John turned pale, dropping the bank book in shock. He should have confirmed this multiple times when buying the house. Do people forget such things after 30 years? That's right. So $2,100 isn't even enough for 1 month. I couldn't help but smile. He had only left $2,100, but I would ask about the whereabouts of the other savings I had later. Wait a minute. I didn't hear anything about that. You were the one who said I could have this house for $700 a month, Johnny. So, Maria refers to John as Johnny. Is that the kind of relationship they have? A chill ran down my spine, and I wasn't the only one. John was looking at the two with a cold expression. What are you going to do? Can you pay? If you want to keep living in this house, you have to. And by the way, We have no intention of paying for a house we're not living in, so don't expect anything from us. David and James nodded in agreement with my words. Then John questioned me. Wait, then how have you been paying the $2,700 monthly loan? A housewife like you lounging at home couldn't possibly pay that. After 30 years together, John still didn't understand me. It was a profound disappointment. Mother runs an e-commerce site. It's quite popular, you know. Didn't you know, Dad? I'm helping her with the photography for the site. David handles the accounting. Yes, I've been running an e-commerce site for quite some time, a job I could do while staying at home. It's been quite successful, and recently, inspired by our pet, Coco, I started selling pet products. Thanks to the help of our 2 sons, the business is doing even better now. John looked at me in disbelief when he learned about my earnings. Hearing our conversation, Maria raised her voice. John, you're on my side, right? You're living with me, aren't you? If you're earning so much, you should pay off the remaining mortgage. John joined in, agreeing with Maria. What an outrageous father, expecting his son to pay off the mortgage. John, staying remarkably calm, looked straight at Maria and said, Maria, you got me a job that would keep me away for long periods. What were you doing during the 2 weeks I was gone? Did you take good care of my mother's house, doing chores and preparing meals? You didn't, right? And besides that. John then laid out several photos on the table. They showed Maria walking closely with an unknown man in a busy downtown area. Some photos even clearly captured them entering a hotel. What is this? This is a fake. Are you trying to frame me with these? Maria grabbed the photos from the table and started tearing them apart. Sorry, but those are negatives. They can't be faked. James is a professional photographer. He has a passion for his craft and, instead of using digital cameras, he prefers film cameras in his daily work. I just happened to see her downtown and thought I was mistaken. But then I saw her again on a different day. I was worried about my brother. So I just snapped the photos. James explained, as Maria glared at him. Without changing his expression, David, in a detached voice, told Maria. Maria, let's end this. We're getting a divorce. At David's words, Maria screamed. What? David, you don't get to order me around. I'm so over a sneaky man like you. Since you're the one asking for a divorce, you'll have to pay me alimony. Maria, though beautiful and well-styled, sadly lacks in personality and intellect. She probably wouldn't understand even if we told her that she, being at fault, should be the one to pay alimony. It's a waste of time to try to make her understand, so we'll let the lawyer explain it in detail. More importantly, there are other things we need to question Maria about. By the way, Maria, it's a bit late to ask, but you aren't really pregnant, are you? Maria's face, which was red with anger, suddenly contorted. Maria, it's been 5 months since you came here, but your body shape hasn't changed at all. And even if you drink and smoke moderately, doing it every night is a bit much, don't you think? Maria's face became increasingly rigid. And then, with a completely stiff expression, she retorted. What are you talking about? A little lie like that is nothing to get upset about. You should be thanking me for giving you the joy of possibly having a grandchild. I'm actually glad I didn't have David's child. I almost raised my hand to her at that point. Her lack of consideration for others' feelings was infuriating. Looking at David, he seemed calmer than expected, perhaps having suspected the lie. You said you were hospitalized and took money from my mother for that, right? That could be considered fraud. James added, to which Maria responded. I really was hospitalized. It wasn't for pregnancy, but another illness. No one believed Maria's words. It was already confirmed on her social media that she went on a trip to Hawaii during the period she claimed to be hospitalized. Her suntanned skin was probably due to that trip. She must have thought I, an older lady, wouldn't be on social media. Her carelessness was almost laughable. While we were confronting Maria, John was sipping tea, acting as if he had nothing to do with it. It was about time to make him face the consequences. So? What are you going to do? Are you going to stay in this house? Then John, as if he had a brilliant idea, said to me. I can't pay $2,700 a month. If you guys are unreliable, why not sell the house? It's worth millions. It's in my name, so it's my money, right? Then I'll find a new house with that money. How about that for a great idea? His shallow thinking almost made me respect him. I explained to John in a way he could understand. John, there are still 6 years left on the mortgage, roughly $200,000. Let's say the house is worth $300,000. If we sell it, we'll only get $100,000. Understand? And we'll split that $100,000 in the property division. You might get $50,000. But I'll be claiming alimony from you for your infidelity and other matters. So, in the end, you won't have much left. Think about that. John wore an expression that made it hard to tell if he understood what I was saying. He probably didn't know where to begin asking questions. Huh? Wait, what do you mean by property division? Indeed, it's a term that would pique one's interest. I answered simply. Yes, because we are getting a divorce. For a moment, John's face contorted. I thought it would be hard for him to bring up the next part, so I decided to explain. John, you promised to introduce your friends to Maria's model friends, right? It's popular among young people these days, isn't it? Going to dinner with older men and getting an allowance? You and Maria had a win-win relationship. Did you know that mixers with older men and models were happening in this living room almost every night? At my words, both John and Maria turned pale. They clearly knew what I was talking about. Maria, ever resilient, still retorted. Don't talk nonsense. There's no proof of that. I presented the evidence as Maria wished. It was a video from the living room recorded on my cell phone. It showed John and his older friends, along with young women who appeared to be models, having a loud party in this living room. Drinking and socializing. Before Maria could accuse me of illegal recording, I clarified. This is footage from the pet camera in the living room, meant for our pet, Coco. I usually turn it off when I leave the house. Someone must have turned it on while drunk. I was surprised when this footage was sent to me unexpectedly. Originally, the camera was to monitor Coco, but it inadvertently provided evidence. Hey, Dad. By the way, I also caught you on camera going to a hotel with young girls downtown, so there's no escaping that. I wish I didn't have to take such photos of my own father. With all the evidence presented, John and Maria were finally at a loss for words. Both of them sank deep into the sofa, staring off into the distance. The spacious living room, meant for family gatherings, now felt more like a funeral parlor. What must this house, built 30 years ago with so many dreams, think of this broken family now? I wish I could ask it. In the silence, I heard the creak of the house settling. I knew John couldn't pay the mortgage. Perhaps I wanted to see what decision he would make under these circumstances. John suggested selling the house. His love for this house was only that deep. Maybe he lost interest in the house and the family when he stopped contributing financially. I wonder if I should have divorced him sooner. It's too late to know now. There's a scratch on this wall. I'll fix it later. After I paid off the remaining mortgage in full and transferred the house to my name, it became my house, no longer John's. I couldn't bring myself to sell the house I had put so much love into. John wanted to sell it until the end, to keep some money for himself, but I firmly rejected that idea. He should learn to be frugal after spending lavishly for so long. The savings we had as joint property seemingly vanished on his youthful adventures. Hence, I'm demanding alimony without mercy. I heard through the grapevine that he's now living in a small apartment. The house has been slightly remodeled, and now serves as both my office and home. David and James are living here with me, helping with my business. They're more than just helpers now, they're indispensable staff. Mom, can you check this? David, utilizing his existing qualifications, is in charge of accounting. The divorce with Maria was finalized through a lawyer, and it seems her parents paid the alimony in full. Apparently, they will be asking Maria to repay them. She kept spouting nonsense to David till the end, but he ignored it all. There's a possibility that lying about the pregnancy could constitute a crime since I gave her money based on that lie. However, since Maria's parents repaid the money I had given her, I chose not to file a lawsuit. Kind David deeply regretted not being able to give me a grandchild. David, James, let's take a break. As the weather was nice, we sat on the garden lawn to rest. We used to sunbathe in the yard when the boys were little. I'm happiest right now. At my spontaneous words, both of my sons smiled together. We planted a small sapling in the house's garden. It signifies a new beginning and wishes for future happiness. Coco, our pet, took an interest in the sapling, running and tumbling around it. I wonder what I will be like when this sapling grows large. What about my sons, and how will Coco be? After a moment of contemplation, I stopped thinking about it. Because I feel happy now. From the balcony window, my sons waved at me. Coco looked at their faces and let out a cute sound. What a beautiful day today. I am happy now.